now there is I call it a gold rush for level 4. And for that, Innoviz 2 is perfect.
Hello, listeners. Today we are joined by Omer Keilaf, CEO of Innoviz Technologies. We're going to talk about the LiDAR market, how Innoviz differentiates, and where the future of LiDAR is headed. Omer, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
You bet. So let's start back at the beginning. Take us back to 2016. What did the LiDAR market look like back then, and what convinced you there was room to build a new company?
No, I think it was actually quite obvious that LiDARs are a bottleneck, you might say, to allow to enable self-driving vehicles in scale. The best-in-class LiDARs at the time were huge and super expensive. My background is full of many developments where I was in startups or other places where I have shrunk big optical devices into a very small design. And that looked like a very interesting problem to solve. I personally come from a personal story of my own family where my sister was involved in a very serious car accident. And it's not like the reason I've started the company, but it is definitely makes sure of keeps my commitment to it because she was involved in the car accident. I was not in the car, but my life completely turned around following that accident when I was 10 years old and my parents had to take care of her for a few years. And realizing the impact of a car accident. People usually talk about how many people die on the road, right? Just realizing the impact of a car accident, of an injury of your sister, seeing the circles of the impact that such an occasion can create on one's life, I think definitely taught me about the importance of solving this problem. And I think that in many ways, with all of the challenges related to automotive market and LiDAR specifically, it's all really zero compared to the importance, right? I mean, whenever you feel it's tough, you can always tell yourself, how dare you even to complain, right? I mean, who cares? Like, it's too important and we need to focus.
Wow, that's really powerful. Yeah, I can definitely resonate having family members also who've been in severe car accidents. And I like how broadly you're thinking about it, that it's not just, I think when we tend to think about autonomy, we think about like, oh, sweet, I can text without
Yeah.
and I can save time and it's about like productivity. But I really like your point where it's ultimately about safety, and that impacts not only the people that are in the car, but their families and their
Yeah.
friends. Yeah.
Look, today I hosted a class. We host every week a class from somewhere in Israel, showing them a little bit about technologies. And as I told them today, when I gave them the lecture, I told them, look, you came here using probably a bus or something, and that's possibly the biggest risk that you are exposed to on a day to day. Like our need to move from one point to another is still exposing us to the biggest risk in our day to day. And there isn't really a reason for that. I mean, this is something that we can deal with. It's not a toll that we need to sacrifice to the gods. That for us to move from one point to another, we need to sacrifice a part of us. And people are usually when we are in a car, we are unaware of the level of risk that we are really exposed to. It's not something that we think about. As you said, people are thinking about autonomous driving as a leisure, as like how I can use my time better. They don't really think about how they are diminishing their own risk. But it's really what it is all about.
Yeah, definitely. As a parent, that resonates too. I always thought I'd get my kids like a really cheap car, so they would learn they don't get a BMW right when they're first driving. But it's interesting that it's flipping on its head, and I'm thinking like, wow, I actually need to buy a new car that has these safety features like hands off, eyes off. Teach them how to drive, of course, but have that as a parent as that safety, you know, mechanism.
Yeah.
So 2016, you said, I definitely see the value in autonomy. Today, LiDARs are very useful, but they're big, they're mechanical, they're spinning, they cost $10,000. I have experience with electronics, optics, and shrinking things down. I think I could tackle this and ultimately work toward a solid state LiDAR. And presumably it'd be much cheaper and could help unlock autonomy. That must have been your vision, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the point in time where I actually thought about, Innoviz, or you can say LiDAR, was much before I started Innoviz. It was somewhere in 2012 where I was first, my spark moment, you can say, was when I saw the commercial from Microsoft on the Xbox Kinect, when they used a sensor for 3D sensing for gesture recognition. And I was pretty amazed by this new dimension, that you can actually capture. And I was intrigued on, possibly doing something that can take that outside and, not only in the living room, but, in 2012, 13, everybody were focusing on developing technologies for mobile phones.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though I had an idea for a very small sensor, for a mobile phone, it's still too big, you know.
Sure.
So I kind of kept that in the drawer. And somewhere end of 2015, when I thought, okay, autonomous driving is a new platform, slightly bigger than a mobile phone, and realizing that the incumbent is this big and so expensive, I realized that there is a good fit between, the idea which I came from. And this is how I started. It was a really, it was driven by, I would say, a good experience in developing high-end technologies. I knew nothing about automotive. I knew nothing about LiDARs, by the way, really. I've developed tons of other technologies in communication systems, in spectrometry, and I was working for a startup that developed a memory compression. We were bought by Apple. And then I worked for a company where we developed a tiny pico projector. It was bought by ST Microelectronics. And really, I was working on different technologies and different industries, never in automotive. I didn't know what really is a LiDAR before I started Innoviz. I called it like a 3D camera.
Mm.
But I knew that there's nothing really I'm worried about, that I've never, I don't know what is a LiDAR, but I'll do it better than everyone.
There you go. I love it. Yeah, it sounds like you're a technologist and entrepreneur, and have faith that you can solve problems and take them to market. So early on, I know, speaking of BMW, early on you had a relationship with BMW back in it started in I think 2017. So how is you in a startup, maybe just 1 year in, how did you
Mhm.
earn the trust of a global OEM?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, look, we started in 2016, and we were able to showcase our first working prototype in less than a year.
Nice.
And it was quite impressive, for the stage it was. And when we met with the BMW management, and by the way, it was at CES, when we met first the management from BMW and Mercedes, but was our first touch point. And when they saw the demo and had a first discussion with us, they basically instructed the R&D teams to study, what we are offering. And we had a huge amount of people traveling back and forth from Germany to Israel, from Israel to Germany. We had endless of workshops. And I think what eventually led to their conviction was not only I would say, the maturity, because we were really in the early stage. It was primarily the strategy that we had. uh, they saw a big alignment between what they thought would be the right technology and the capabilities of the team. That I think that they, after spending a lot of time with the engineering team, I think that they saw a very capable and motivated team, and basically that's what led to this nomination. Obviously, for us, it was a huge, you know, a huge support. I mean, working with a company like BMW for many years has actually really led us to what we are today. You know, we were a young company that had to develop the technology. Meanwhile, trying to, develop the core technology, and it was super tough. You know, there were many lidar programs in the industry that many of them failed for very, for different reasons. We had to deal with ramping up the core components, the core technology, the production line, the testers, the software, and automotive grade, all in a very, I would say, short time. Meanwhile, COVID
No,
and
yeah.
some other hiccups, and eventually we were able to launch. And that's something that only two OEMs can say that they've managed to do so. It's Mercedes and BMW. And we are obviously very proud. And I think that it definitely built our credibility and our position in the market, which eventually allowed us later to position ourselves also as a direct supplier,
Mm.
tier one. You know, with the BMW program, we were too young of a company to try to compete on the program ourselves, but we partnered with different tier ones as a tier two. We were awarded to the program for BMW as a tier two through Magna as our partner. And you know, through the years of development, we got a lot of experience in understanding what it takes to be our own direct supplier. And at some point of time, when we were able to introduce our second generation Innoviz 2, we felt it's a good point where we can start over, you might say, since we already need to develop, the product from scratch and the production line. You know, we should do it ourselves. And we've introduced ourselves to Volkswagen at the time, and we're able to get their confidence to accept us as a tier one, which was not a very easy task. You can imagine for a group like Volkswagen, second largest OEM in the market, it's definitely a big leap of faith in a small tier one from Israel that it's the first time. But for us, it was a critical moment in our life. Of course, going public at the time was a major contributor to build the confidence to the customer that we are self-sufficient, and there is a lot of transparency in our booking. So I think it was also very helpful, which led to many other good things.
Nice, nice. It's really strategically smart. I like how you started as a tier two, working with a tier one, both to help take you to the customer and to probably teach you what customer expectations and whatnot. But also, there have been other LiDAR players who tried to jump straight into tier one manufacturing, and that's like huge investments up front. And so I think it's very clever how you tried not to sort of skip to being a tier one and learn a lot of expensive lessons the hard way, but partner with someone and work your way into it. Um,
Yeah.
you
You know, I
mentioned
would say you need to survive your first product,
yes,
you
yes,
know,
exactly.
to get your second product, in an easier life. We
Yeah,
have a lot of lessons learned that were baked into a second generation and also our third generation, you know.
yes, yes. So you launched that first Innoviz one. You were a tier two, but you got it into BMW, and they were able to launch a level three personal pilot in 2023 or so in Germany. Then you were able to expand, become a tier one supplier, work now with a second customer, Volkswagen, and you mentioned going public and how that was also just very aligned with transparency and sort of like being like a grown up company. Um, Say more about going public. What else was it, like capital raise, or what else went into that decision?
Um, the funny story was that at the time, it was somewhere at May 2020 when it was, we were all locked in
Yeah.
because of COVID. And it was very unclear about where things are going. We were in the middle of the program for BMW, trying to work full steam ahead, making sure that everything is stable. And we were really asking ourselves where things are going. And then we got a phone call from one of our competitors. I will not say who, that asked us if we were interested in doing a merger for something that is called a SPAC.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I remember like asking ourselves like, what? What? And for us, it was a wake-up call, realizing that actually some of our competitors are going to go public and raise a lot of money.
Mm,
And from that point on, it was no longer a question whether we want to do it or is it it's a must. We understand it's eventually going to be a competitive advantage that we cannot allow our competitors to be in it while we are not. So from our point of view, it wasn't whether we like it or not. And people ask me if I enjoy it, definitely not. And whether I regret it, also definitely not, because it was the right thing for the company. Eventually, maybe 6 years ago, maybe there were 200 LiDAR companies, right? 4 years ago, it was screened to less because only a few went public, and today even much less. So I don't think there is a question whether I regret it or not. I think it was the right thing. I would have done it again. I think it helped the company, and eventually it served us. As I said, eventually going public allowed us to become our own tier one, which I think have really expanded our ability to succeed because we control our future by ourselves. We are able to be exposed to meaningful revenues coming from NREs that as a tier one, it was something that looked very lucrative to us when we were a tier two, and we were kind of looking at the NREs that the tier ones are asking for, and when we say, what the hell? We want some of that. Why are we not getting this? And it definitely is helping us. I mean, look, we booked around we announced we booked around $110 million of NREs. That's a huge amount of money that is offsetting our expenses, directly, right? I think we took out of it around 40 this last year, and you can imagine this leaves us a very nice booking for the next couple of years. And we expect to win more business this year as a tier one, which will grow this. That's a huge amount of money that is helping us to offset our expenses while we are growing our sales coming from sales of LiDARs. Obviously, we are ramping up our production line. We entered the non-automotive market, which is pretty amazing. Sell ASPs are very high, and I think we're going to be very successful there. So if you kind of combine all of those together, I think we have the automotive market kind of funding our R&D, and is also allowing us to introduce new products. It's very difficult for a non-automotive company to become automotive. It's very easy for an automotive company to become non-automotive, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
Eventually, it has been our strategy all along. I mean, we knew that the automotive space is going to consolidate. There's going to be only a few players, and we need to fight together. We've seen some of our competitors, give up and start to build the non-automotive industry, and we enjoy that. And eventually, the dancing around the chairs is going to stop. And there's only a few that have a seat reserved. And this is, by the way, this is how it usually works in the automotive space. If you look on other sector, not just LiDARs, you look on cameras or radars or even airbags,
Yeah.
you have two or three suppliers. You know, even airbags that you have so many in every car, you would assume it's a commodity and there are so many suppliers. It's not the case. Eventually, consolidation. The industry likes to work with a very few suppliers because of the economy of scale and maturity, etc. And this is where LiDAR is going to end up. There's going to be one or two suppliers for the West, and there are going to be suppliers for the, for the East. And I believe that it position us in a very good place right now because we've gained good traction and will continue to do so. We can talk about Innoviz 3 and where I think it will lead us, but I think eventually, the music is now, is now tuned off, and I think when we look to the sides, we don't see many, if I can say any, but and now we're starting to benefit from the fact that there is an existing non-automotive industry.
Mhm.
We are observing that there are industries or applications that are still remain unserved because of lack of capabilities of the sensors that are offered today in the non-automotive, and I'm referring mostly to range and resolution. This is where we really shine. We have very high performance compared to the others, and we see that there are still sectors that are unserved, and we see less competition there. And this is where we are pretty active and get a lot of traction. And again, as I said, we are mostly trying to gain some of the, I would say, fast sales cycles, grabbing some landmark in those areas. And I'm sure that over time, people will be aware of our activity in the non-automotive. And we can talk about what we showed at CES, etc. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is great. You covered a lot of things that I wanted to hit on. So NREs is a really interesting one. So we started with talking about why you guys did a SPAC and went public, and I'm that was probably maybe a bit painful, although incredibly valuable, because I think a lot of public equities investors don't really appreciate small, still a startup company, but very high capex company like you were. So you got access to capital, but I'm sure that some people were sort of like, "Oh, what's the story here?" Obviously, NREs is a way by being a tier one, by getting visibility and wins with big OEMs, you're able to get access to these NREs, which you've mentioned, non-recurring engineering revenue for people who are listening and don't know. And that's obviously like the design, you're being paid to help do some of that design work up front, which you're saying is funding your business until the volume scales where you're actually have larger revenues on actually selling the lidars as the programs ramp. But to your point, these are automotive programs. They take a long time. You have to deal with safety and certification and whatnot. Now, let's see. So then you also talked about how this helps you win with other customers. And meanwhile, the market has been consolidating, and you've been talking about for quite some time on a lot of your earnings calls, a winner takes most dynamic. And I think you hit on it well, which is just like we see this everywhere in automotive, and it makes sense for a lot of reasons. You briefly mentioned the West versus East dynamic, and I wanted to like pause there really quick. I know that not only are you working with BMW, Volkswagen, and undisclosed top 5 global OEM, but I believe I saw mention of an Asian OEM.
No, there is also a Daimler
And
Truck.
Daimler Truck. Nice, perfect. Yes. So
Yeah.
example of it's not just personal automotive vehicles.
Right. I think that the main problem, look, I think what investors always kind of they want to they want the names, right? They
Mm,
want the news, and we work in an industry that automotive OEMs are a bit shy of publicity, And sometimes those press releases, they know it's important for companies like us because we know eventually we have investors and we tell them that this is something that gives them confidence that we are making progress, and it's important for us to be able to reflect that we are making progress, and sometimes it's much more than we can actually deliver in terms of the what we can share with the investors, because OEMs in general are usually very secretive about what they're doing. They don't want their
Sure.
competitors to know what they're doing. They don't want to commit to their own investors. Oh, there was a time maybe 6 years ago where OEMs were, oh, we'll be fully autonomous by 2025, and then every quarter, they will be asked, oh, how are you like with your plans? And they've kind of like, okay, like we want to do this, but I'm not sure I want to now go publicly and start making those claims because I'll be held accountable to this. And this is something that always kind of disappoints. I know that investors always like that we will name the customer, and whenever we do those announcements, that we try to show progress on one hand, and we're trying to also reserve our relationship
Yes.
with the OEM. Even with that top five OEM, I can tell you that after we made this press release, I can tell you that we told the OEM that we want to make this press release, telling that we've signed this. And the guy that we were working with said, okay, I'll take it with the marketing. And then, like, really, like 10 minutes before the press release is out, I get like an email, don't make this press release. We're not okay with press release, blah, blah, blah. And, it went out. But it was too late. But it was kind of like there is always like the higher level of hierarchy in these OEMs that are very very I would
Conservative.
say conservative, and they don't like those price releases. But it's kind of like what we need to deal with. So we are, on one hand, we're trying to keep our relationship well with the OEM. On the other hand, we need to keep our investors somehow satisfied. If I would be able to talk with the market about everything that is going on, then it's first of all, it's a roller coaster. It's like if I only can talk about CES was an amazing event from that point of view. I can talk about what we've seen at CES, but it was pretty interesting. Um, for example, so I came into CES. We had like, I don't know, 40 something meetings. I would say 90, maybe less, maybe 85% of them were around level 4.
Oh,
Truck companies, shuttles, robotaxis. And for me, it's great because those programs, they need higher volume right now because it's multiple sensors. The SOPs are less difficult. There is a gold rush now for level 4, now that Waymo is making a lot of noise. And we're quite successful also with level 4, with the ID Buzz, with Mobileye, with Daimler Truck. So, we have a huge momentum there, and I'm sure that will continue. On the other hand, what I kind of like, I thought that level 3 is somehow kind of like in a, unclear, what's the pace. And I was surprised. I was really surprised positively about several OEMs that were talking about timelines that I was surprised about in terms of their plans to launch a level 3. And we had a debate internally trying to understand kind of like what has changed. Why not suddenly those OEMs that we've been hearing, yeah, there will be an RFQ, there will be an RFQ, now actually pursuing that. And I think maybe two things I can talk about that. One of them actually said something close to that. He said for a very long time in the last several years, the innovation in terms of the next generation was tied between a platform that was supposed to introduce EV on one side and autonomous driving, L3. And the EV became like it was a turmoil, like things were pushed out, and somehow everything was pushed out because since the platform was undecided and they would require so many changes, they couldn't really sign the decision on how the platform would be, so you cannot even launch the program. Now that many of them kind of made their clear decision on what would be their next platform would be, then the level 3 discussions are now on the table and possibly are now the most pronounced innovation, in terms of like what might be the next platform. So this was something that we kind of identified at CES, that suddenly there are, I don't know, several things that are moving faster, you can say, and target SOPs which I think are pretty bullish, and let's see that it's still the case. Maybe a different reason to that, and I think it's somehow related to the Innoviz 3. I think that for a very long time, um, one of the hurdles related to including a LiDAR into the vehicle is the design. For a privately owned vehicle, the looks of the car is like, there's nothing more important than how the car could have many features. If it doesn't look good, it won't be sold. Okay. And for a privately owned vehicle anyway. And there were many design discussions with OEMs, whether it's going to be in the grill or in the roof. And the holy grail was always behind the windshield, where you basically don't see it. But the behind the windshield was always kind of an extra friction. LiDAR by itself is a huge effort, and there were many programs that have failed, and now adding to it another level of constraints. It needs to be significantly smaller because there is no room for a big box. It needs to be super quiet. It needs to be consuming much less power because it's directly to the sun. And you need to have extra buffer for the performance because the windshield has some degradation. And you need to deal with it somehow. So adding those constraints on top of a technology that is already, so difficult, many OEMs have said, okay, I don't want to add another challenge to this already difficult program, so I'll put it on the roof or in the grill. I think that created a lot of turmoils. I remember we were in an RFQ with an OEM for a year about installing the LiDAR in the grill. End of the year, after a year of RFQ, the OEM said, the designer said, we're not willing to do it in the grill, it has to go into the roof. And then we spent another year of an RFQ for installing it in the roof. And the end of the year, I swear to God, the designer said it cannot be in the roof, it needs to be behind of the windshield. And I remember I told them, guys, let's put it behind the seat. I mean, let's put it everywhere you want. Just let like one RFQ for everything. Don't change it any longer. It's so I hope, I really hope that it is the holy grail. I think that if you can do it behind the windshield, I think it will converge to that, because I think that it really is the best position in terms of looks and kind of height and cleaning system, etc. So I think it is, if it's doable, then I think it will get there. And I think that if one company can actually do it right, I think we can do it. I mean, it is something that we are doing. And Innoviz 3 it's a very attractive product. It's very small. In Innoviz 3, that at CES, we also introduced a version that includes a camera inside in order to encapsulate more space. It's a packaging problem eventually behind the windshield. And that was something that many OEMs found very interesting. So I think that the combination of everything I mentioned, I think kind of unlocks some of the frictions related to level 3. And
Amazing.
I hope it will.
Yes, yes. Okay, so let me reflect this back because these are really interesting insights coming kind of hot off the press, off the heels. I know you just got back from CES.
Yeah,
So,
I'm still jet lagged.
yeah, I bet. Oh, man. I do not envy you. So, yes, you're saying that historically, things that have slowed down OEMs have been the coupling of EV program with like ADAS, autonomy, L3, L4. And right now, they're kind of going like a little bit of a decoupling and really prioritizing L3, but also L4, because there's a lot of talk. Obviously, Waymo is doing great on the robotaxi front, but then you have Tesla making progress, and even Rivian, saying they're getting into the game. So there's definitely competition, and now that there's some decoupling happening, OEMs are saying let's go. But also, you're pointing out that the previous form factor of something like an Innoviz 2 was too big in that design, which is totally right. People make purchasing decisions 100% based on design. That design was slowing things down. And now with the Innoviz 3, which is 60% smaller, maybe 35% cheaper even to boot, now you can put it behind the windshield, and so that's kind of like the holy grail form factor at a lower cost, lower power, equal performance, and you feel like Innoviz 3 is probably going to let you reach a broad portfolio of vehicles and an expanded TAM on maybe an accelerated timeline.
Yeah, I think that generally we are in a good position because now there is I call it a gold rush for level 4. And for that, Innoviz 2 is perfect, really. Because these platforms, they usually mount the LiDAR in different locations around the vehicle. It's not behind the windshield, and it's a mature product. It's really high performance. And for level 3, I would say also there are programs right now that are, I would say they do have a rush to get to the market, and they are not targeting behind the windshield, where Innoviz 2 is a good fit. We are offering the Innoviz 3 only to programs where behind the windshield is the way to go, because otherwise there is no, I would say, advantage. I mean, you use an off-the-shelf product that we have in production that is automotive grade, you should use it. I think it's better. But for programs where there is a specific packaging requirement for behind the windshield, this is where we are offering the Innoviz 3. And yes, I believe that eventually it will converge to that. Of course, when you talk about level 4, there are many sensors around the vehicle, and not only one of them will have a windshield. So eventually, it's a combination of different solutions. We are offering both long range and short range. And as you can see in the way that we work, we always try to understand what will be the best and optimized solution for the different configurations. And Innoviz 3 is not our last product.
I like it. Love it. So you have the portfolio today to meet the needs for both L3 and L4. You've got long range, short range, you've got the form factor.
I'll
How,
tell you I'll tell you what more we have that others don't.
please.
And I'll tell you something that will probably sound very, I would say, too strong, but I truly believe in it. I'll tell you what is the difference between a LiDAR for level 2, a LiDAR for level 3, and a LiDAR for level 4. People usually think it's about range or resolution or frame rate or whatever. It's not the case. You can have the best LiDAR in terms of performance, and it can still be irrelevant for level 3. And I'll tell you what's the difference. In level 2, you have a driver that is supervising, right? So even if the sensor resets every 5 minutes, it's okay. You can say the sensor sees everything, but only for 5 minutes, at each time. And maybe every particle of dirt would block it, and it will not see very well from time to time because the car would, drive in an unclean environment. And then it's okay. Level 2, the sensor should work only most of the time. In level 3, it's an order of magnitude, because now the driver is not looking on the road. You need the sensor to work for a very long time. What are the occasions where it's maybe requiring the driver attention? Maybe now the car is becoming dirty because it stepped on some mud and the sensor is dirty. Then maybe you can call the driver to hold the wheel and for a few minutes and a few seconds, and it cleans the sensor, and level 3 is enabled again. And maybe that's fine. Now let's talk about level 4. There is a car, there is a family sitting at the back seat, and now the car is driving over a puddle of mud. And you know what happens when a puddle of mud drops on the camera? You don't see so much,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Now, what would be the case if both the LiDAR and the camera becomes dirty at the same time?
The car
That's a
stops.
pretty tough situation to be at, where the car is unable to see anything and the family is sitting behind. There's no one to hold the wheel to allow the cleaning system to operate. Sounds distressing, right? What I
Yeah.
just told you, right? I'll tell you that there is no other LiDAR that I'm familiar with that is able to be resilient to that, other than us. it's surprising, right? It
Yeah.
sounds like, what do
Yeah.
you mean? It's like, I mean, the claim to fame for LiDARs is that it serves as redundancy to cameras, right? And the claim to fame talks about that you need to show that for any probable problem to one sensor, the correlation for the same problem at the same time to the other sensor is very low.
Sure.
Meaning that, for example, a direct sun, rain,
Yep.
things that, LiDARs could be good at, cameras don't, low light conditions. A puddle of mud that now covers the optical path for the LiDAR is, I don't know any LiDAR other than ours that can work with a lot of mud on it. And that's a situation that at level 4, if I would be a developer, I would be very worried about. Because if my vehicle is now driving and because of some dirt, and that's not, it's not a mistake, right? It's not like a fatal error. It happens, right? And in this situation, if my sensors are unable to see for a few seconds of cleaning, that's very disturbing. And this is, I believe, one of the reasons that we've been very successful with level 4. Currently, as far as I know, Innoviz is the only company who designed the LiDAR for level 4. That's the big difference between level 3 and level 4. You need to be 100% available. It's not 99.999. It's like 100% available. You need to be sure that with dirt and mud and cracks, your sensors still see very well. And that's something that we have, I would say, worked very hard to establish. And I think other LiDAR companies that haven't really reached level 3, I don't think they understand the problem, really, because they've never been to a situation where the liability is on the OEM to know how important this availability is. LiDARs that have been operated on level 2, they don't care, you know. Even the LiDAR is making a reset every 5 minutes, it's fine. There is a huge difference between level 2 and level 3, and there is another huge difference between level 2 and level 4. And I think this is something that, people don't really see the difference, but it's a big difference.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's great. Thanks for walking us through that. That makes a ton of sense. That the requirements are higher with the increasing levels of autonomy, and
It's about quality, it's about reliability, availability.
yes,
These
and
are
being able to
things
manufacture that at scale.
that's the automotive grade for you.
Yes, yes, yes. So would you say, it feels like you guys got there first to realizing there's these requirements for level 4 and you've designed to it, and maybe that competitors aren't that far along so they haven't realized that yet. It Given that it's kind of like a winner takes all market, do you feel like this is a moat where, sure, technically maybe even if they figure out how to do this, just the fact that you're there, you're in production, you can do it during this gold rush is really a defensible advantage for you?
First, we do have patents around it.
Oh, nice.
Second, yes, of course. Eventually, this is where the market consolidates. And I believe that it's like the Maslow pyramid. We are in the safety
Mm,
stage. And when the stack will operate, the appetite to change it is going to be zero. I mean, developers would go to the different layers of the user experience, etc. Once it will work at scale and cost will go down, the appetite to explore new ways is going to go away, and the economy of scale will not allow any changes. So I think that definitely being in this stage, a strong early mover is important. It is a land grab, and eventually it will consolidate
yeah.
around specific players and will stay there.
Yeah, very exciting. It's a very exciting time for you right now in automotive. And then I guess lastly, just to close it out, not only are you kind of riding the wave at the head of automotive as it's potentially collapsing during a gold rush and you have defensible advantage, But you mentioned also because you started in automotive where the requirements are higher, you can take that technology very quickly and go to other markets, whether it's agriculture, construction, mining, or even security. Um, I guess just any parting thoughts on those other markets. I know you've talked about higher ASPs for some of them. I even wonder about like recurring revenue in security. Like, what does the future look like in these different markets?
No, definitely. I think again, combining the performance advantages and availability. You know, when you work, you said agriculture or mining, or whenever you install a lidar on a pole somewhere, you don't want to come every 2 weeks to clean it.
Sure.
You
Yes.
know, so these capabilities are eventually in our advantage and are clear to customers. Some of them, we benefit from the fact that they already use lidar, so they know better today what they really need and what they are missing. So for us, it's a easy selling pitch. There are places where we identify that it's a clear ocean, because blue ocean, because other lidars were unable to serve because of their lack of range and resolution. These are primarily for applications where longer range is needed, like perimeter security, etc. And I believe that these are areas that will have good, I would say, good traction. Um, and in terms of recurrent revenues, so yes, definitely. Once you are installed in um, you know, these applications, there is recurrent revenues, yearly support, etc. Yes, we expect to have our portion at that as well.
Amazing. Exciting. Omer, thank you for the time. We covered so much ground. This was a great conversation. I learned a lot. I know the listeners will get a lot out of it too. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.